Today marks a convergence that's not easy to process. On the one hand, you have COVID-19, this pandemic that is sweeping across our nation and that is resulting in financial loss and, of course, the loss of life. So many battling the disease itself or affected by it one way or another in their lives. And so we are praying fervently that God would make this plague pass from our midst. And then on the other hand, this is Wednesday of Holy Week. So we look ahead to Good Friday, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We're going to celebrate on Sunday. This is the high point of our Christian calendar. The Christian year is Easter Sunday, when we think once again about the resurrection of Jesus, which changed everything. It changed all of human history. Today, we want to think about that. We want to think about what it was like on that first week, the Wednesday, in fact, of that first week. So if you're there in AD 33, at least by the reckoning of Andreas Kostenberger and Justin Taylor, AD 33, April 1st, AD 33 to be exact. So if we were on that Wednesday, we would be looking back on Palm Sunday. So Palm Sunday would have been March 29th, AD 33. Jesus would have awakened that day in Bethany, and he would have begun his walk to Jerusalem. And then when he got to the Mount of Olives on the east side of Jerusalem, he would have made preparations for his actual entrance into Jerusalem. So he would have sent the disciples in to get a donkey and a colt, and he would ride into Jerusalem on that donkey. All kinds of expectations about that action. It's no small action. So the prophecy of Zechariah 9 would have been ringing in people's ears, where the Davidic king was riding into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. The crowd was shouting out to Jesus as the Son of David for just that reason. And then, of course, the sound system is blaring with Psalm 118:26. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So all these are very kingly resonances from the Old Testament. And by Jesus entering into Jerusalem with that kind of king-like presence, in some ways that was the point of no return in his ministry. Kostenberger and Taylor, in their book, The Final Days of Jesus, describe it that way. Up to this point in Jesus' ministry, he could still have managed to live a long, happy, peaceful life. But his actions on Sunday set in motion a series of events that could result only in either his overthrow of the Romans and the current religious establishment or his brutal death. He has crossed the point of no return. There would be no turning back. And Jesus didn't back down from the moment, as we know. But the next day he'll do something every bit as dramatic as the triumphal entry. So now we're at Monday, AD 33. Monday, March 30th, AD 33. This is the cleansing of the temple. So Jesus intensifies things with the Jewish authorities by waltzing into the court of the Gentiles, seeing around him all the people buying and selling, even though they were doing it in supposedly noble reasons to serve worshipers. They were making a profit, and then the Jewish leaders were making a profit. This was a misuse of God's place, sacred place of the temple. And so he rebukes them. He drives out the money changers. It's a violent display of righteous indignation. We don't know a lot about righteous indignation, but Jesus did. So this was a moment of righteous indignation. And what's interesting is if you think about the Old Testament, so often it was actually kings who led revivals. So King Josiah led a famous revival where he brought back the law of Moses into the land. And King Hezekiah led a revival in the nation of Israel. And so in some ways, Jesus leading this cleansing of the temple is a very kingly action. We might think of it as a priestly action, but in some ways it's a very kingly action to take. And it so provokes the Jewish authorities that they ask him, by what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority? So they know something's at work here, and they want to understand what it is. A normal person doesn't do this, wouldn't do this. Well, now we're at Tuesday, March 31st, AD 33. So at this point, Jesus is still staying in Bethany. So he would teach in Jerusalem at the temple during the day. At night, he goes to Bethany, which is a 2 or 3 mile walk from there. And remember, Bethany is where Lazarus was raised from the dead. Mary and Martha are there. Well, on this Tuesday, the temple again is the focus. So Jesus has been there teaching all day. And as they're leaving, the disciples remark on just what a beautiful, impressive temple Herod's Temple is. And perhaps, humanly speaking, it is impressive. Well, Jesus' response when they remark about the greatness of the temple is to say, truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. In other words, total annihilation of this temple. Well, that affects them. And so as they continue their walk, when they get to the top of the Mount of Olives, they ask them, about the end times, about the return of Christ. They say, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So they assume that the destruction of the temple has to do with the end of the age. And Jesus replies to them, the Olivet Discourse. It's on the Mount of Olives. He gives the Olivet Discourse. His reply is a bit complex, though, because what he does is he takes prophecies that have to do with AD 70 and the destruction of the temple, and then he combines them with prophecies that have to do with the end times, his return. And so that makes it very hard to interpret these passages, but there's one verse that seems very clearly to speak of his return. He takes up Son of Man language, and in fact he borrows from Daniel chapter 7 and the prophecies there to prophesy of his own return. He says this. This is in Matthew 24. So then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man. And then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So you hear that. Power, great glory, loud trumpet call. This is a cosmic event. So, this is no local affair that was seen just by a few dozen people. This is a cosmic, international incident of great proportion. But what he's doing here is he's taking Daniel's prophecy and he's basically saying, that's me. So here's Daniel's words, and when I read Daniel's words, you can hear the echo of Jesus on that Olivet Discourse. So Daniel says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. There's no king like our king. A lot of great kings have had impressive power or wealth, but this king is served by all peoples, nations, and languages. Kings have lasted a few decades at most. Queen Elizabeth has had an impressive reign as queen. However, this king, our king, has a dominion that lasts forever. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. There is no king like our king. And it's hard to know when you think of the triumphal entry, the cleansing of the temple, and now these prophecies about the return of Jesus. It's just hard to know what the disciples would have been thinking. Their imagination would have just been rocked. Well, that's Tuesday. So now that leads us to Wednesday, April 1st, AD 33. And in terms of the gospel accounts, all four gospel accounts, it's a little bit difficult to tell what happened on Wednesday. In some ways, it's the quietest day. But a good guess is that was the day that all was taking place behind the scenes. All the conspiracies were taking place by the Jewish leaders, by Judas and all of that. All of that was taking place by the Jewish leaders that would result ultimately in the arrest and then the killing of Jesus. They've had enough. They've had their authority resisted absolutely by Jesus. They've been rebuked in public, humiliated in public by Jesus. The triumphal entry has happened. The cleansing of the temple has happened. Enough is enough. That's in a sense what's going on here. And so finally, all they can do is arrest and then kill Jesus. And so that's going to take place in a mere 2 days. So Kostenberger and Taylor are reflecting on this moment, this Wednesday moment in that week. And they say the stage is set for the final act. The characters are in place. Their goals, motives, and intentions are clear. The king has come for his kingdom and has issued a clear and direct challenge to the reigning structures of political, economic, and religious power. The drama can end in only one of two ways. Either Jesus will topple the reigning powers and establish his kingdom, or he will be killed. No one at that time could possibly comprehend that in God's mysterious plan, there was a third option. So that brings us right up to the edge of that Thursday night when you have the Last Supper, that Friday when you have the crucifixion, and then Sunday, that glorious Sunday when you have the resurrection of Jesus Christ. All this communicates that there simply is no king like our king. Our redemption by this king is unlike any other redemption. Our salvation by this king is unlike any other salvation. We glory in Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And so this week, even as we're praying fervently that COVID-19 would pass, that it would simply pass away from our country, our people, we do pray that Jesus would reign as King in your hearts, now and forever. Amen. Well, we hope to see you Friday night at our streaming service and then Sunday morning as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. We'll see you next time.